Ever since I moved to the charity sector from the demanding world of journalism, I have never encountered such entitled, power-hungry, narcissistic, rude, incompetent people in my whole life. Okay, let's talk about this.
We're Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are NPCs, nonprofit consultants. The better world needs healthier nonprofits, and on this channel, our focus is showing how nonprofits can do better and be better.
Now, we found a Reddit post, and we're sure that you viewers know how important culture is to an organization. This is an example of an extremely toxic environment.
Yeah, as I was reading this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like really, really intense. This is a former journalist who moved into the nonprofit sector. They have been at their job for 1 month, and they are like, I'm done. I'm ready to leave not just the job, but nonprofit altogether over this. According to them, they've had a manager who makes other managers cry. And senior leadership knows, but this person's very hard to fire because they are influential in their area. And this is something that we see a lot in nonprofit work. I don't want to say a lot, but we do see it where there is a leader, a manager, some sort of person who really likes to be in control, doesn't have a problem belittling other people, but because they put themselves in a position where they're really influential, either because they've been a part of an organization for a long time, or because of the role that they happen to hold, or because they're just in the ear of the right people, it almost becomes hard for the leadership, like senior leadership, to just fire them and let them go. Because in their mind, they're probably counting all the people in the organization who will leave if this one person leaves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when I see this, I immediately think about organizations that have family members working together, nonprofit organizations that maybe a founder is a part of the staff, right? You don't want to fire the founder. That could really harm the organization, right? So there are a lot of different things that play in nonprofit because it's not just about who's getting a paycheck and how big their paycheck is. There are a bunch of different things flying all around. How good are they with people? How good are they with, administrative tasks and that kind of stuff? Because nonprofits are working so often at a deficit or with a very small budget, I feel like there's just a lot of room for nonprofits to say, well, they have some things wrong with them, but we're getting a good deal on this employee.
Yeah, or they're getting stuff done, and who are we going to have to replace them? And if they leave, maybe they're connected to a couple people who we really lean on for other things. And there are things that get overlooked because in the process of doing good, sometimes organizations weigh more heavily the people that they're trying to help versus the people who are actually helping them help the people. It's like, oh yeah, our organization, this person is treating people kind of crappily, but we're accomplishing the mission. So is it worth burning out a couple people in order to help a few more people? Which is this super unfortunate dichotomy where it's assumed either we do good or we are good. Instead of saying, maybe we need to do both at the same time. Maybe we need to actually treat the people that we're leading well and help make a positive impact on the world.
Yeah, it's crazy how often nonprofit organizational leaders forget about having the right people on the bus. We talk about this all the time with nonprofits that we're helping out and on this channel and in our course materials and stuff, that getting the right people to link arms with in the nonprofit organization, whether that's donors, volunteers, staff, board members, getting the right people is incredibly crucial to making sure that your nonprofit works well. But it's overlooked a lot because of all of these different things that happen in nonprofit where people are given staff positions that really shouldn't have staff positions. People are given leadership roles that they have zero competency for leadership, but they have some sort of pull with a donor that's giving a lot of money. So if they, don't give this person this leadership role, we're going to lose a bunch of funding. Like that kind of stuff doesn't really happen in the business world as often because they're not trying to accept donations from people. They're not trying to rely on people's generosity with their money and their time and their networks.
You might be listening to this so far and think, I know exactly who to blame. It's the senior management and it's the leader who is making other leaders cry. Actually, they specifically said manager, which I find interesting because managers and leaders aren't always the same thing. And we need to know who we're hiring in nonprofit. But let's jump back into what the original poster actually wrote as part of this. They said, "Trust me, I am not attaching any meaning to work. Actually, the complete opposite. I seriously just want to do good work and go home." Now, listen, I totally think that the other parties have a lot of responsibility that they need to take in this. I also think that part of the issue here might be that this person went into nonprofit work saying, "I'm not going to attach any meaning to the work that I'm doing." So much of the work that's done in nonprofit, because it's trying to help other people, inherently has meaning. And it's that meaning that drives what we do. And what we have found in organizations that tend to really hold that meaning very, very high is a lot of times you're going to have people who aren't going to be as often in leadership, who are going to be picking at every little thing because they're trying so hard to get things moving forward. That doesn't mean that you don't end up with leaders who treat people poorly necessarily, but it does mean that a lot of times if you have an organization that finds great meaning in what they're doing, they're usually running so fast and so hard that a lot of these little micromanaging things kind of tend to fall by the wayside a little bit because no one has time for it. And so right there, I'm like, how are you working a nonprofit and not attaching meaning? Like that seems kind of like a thing.
And on the flip side of this, a lot of these problems arise because nonprofits are running on the assumption that you're not doing this just for a paycheck. You're doing this because you care. Yeah. And if this employee is not attaching any meaning to their work, they're not getting anything out of working there besides just a paycheck, they probably are going to feel like they're working for an extreme deficit. I mean, part of the allure of working in nonprofit or charity work is that you get to go home at the end of the day and say, wow, I helped the world change, instead of going home and say, wow, I worked in a cubicle all day and ran some TPS reports, right? And so if you're not going into nonprofit work and working with a nonprofit that you care deeply about, you're probably going to feel extremely undervalued and underpaid.
Yeah. And the work that you do, like when you care about it, there is a different weight that you carry with it. However, not valuing the work that you're doing in the nonprofit sector, it will still weigh on you differently because it is about helping people. But that feeling and that other piece of it will be missing if you don't actually find meaning in the work that you're doing. She says, it's very taxing to work with someone if they're constantly undermining and criticizing small, petty things. Absolutely. We understand this. When they're making snide comments and dismissing efforts and lacking complete empathy when you are trying to explain yourself. This could very well be like when they said that that this leader has made other people cry. I'm like, yes, this is an issue with the leader. It could be just a personality thing. It might be that maybe they don't care or they just like being in control. Or maybe they are just completely unaware of their personality and how it comes across to the people that they're leading. At the same time, it can be hard if you are not showing that you value and find meaning in the work for someone who might be very, very passionate about the work, to find that patience to be like, you don't even care about this, and yet you're bringing up issues. That could be how it's being brought up. I'm not saying that that's the case. I don't think that is acceptable for a leader to really make anyone cry, especially if it seems like a routine thing or at least a rhythm to
pattern.
It. But that is something to be aware of. When we have people working in nonprofit, we want to make sure that the people who are working with us, that they have a passion and a drive that's going to line up with our organizations so that it's not creating internal conflict for them or for the leaders who are trying to lead them. Because when there are different visions, when there are different whys, and when there are all these other underlying things happening that don't line up together, it can cause very strange conflict that comes out in a very unique way. This is something that for-profits, when we read books for-profit like businesses, is really interesting when everyone can just acknowledge that they're there for the paycheck. And yes, what they're doing, they're like, it matters enough, but ultimately I'm getting paid. In nonprofit work, because people generally aren't there for the paycheck and they have derived greater meaning, when there is conflict between two people who value the meaning at different levels or who have completely different ideas of what they think the vision is and how the vision should be carried out, the conflict can actually become greater because it becomes more personal. And so that could be something happening here too. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating, but we've seen that over the years of working with different organizations.
Yeah. And I'd also add that this is clearly a situation where this manager is lacking in some soft skills.
Yes.
And in the nonprofit world, soft skills are extremely important because people can't go home at the end of the day generally and say, well, at least I'm making good money. And it's not because nonprofits shouldn't strive to value and pay their employees well. Right. It's just sort of the cultural nature of nonprofit work. It's the reason why people only give so much to nonprofits and aren't necessarily funneling grotesque amounts of money into, because they're not getting the same sort of this for that kind of benefit when they give a nonprofit money, right? So it's important to recognize that nonprofits need to have leaders that understand the value of soft skills.
Right. And I think that this is something where for a long time, nonprofits were very much only soft skills focused. I don't want to say only, that's probably not fair, but there was a huge, huge, huge reliance on it where nonprofits weren't expected to have really any business acumen from like a social thing. It's like, oh, but you're doing good work. In the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've seen the rise of entrepreneurial nonprofit leaders, entrepreneurial church leaders, people who understand business systems coming into the nonprofit sector and actually creating order and organization within them, which is good and can be really good. We've also seen the rise, though, of some leaders like this who are so incredibly focused on accomplishing the thing, whatever that thing is, that they forget about those original soft skills because they're like, we brought in the thing that makes these nonprofits more successful than previous iterations, therefore we're doing it better, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and forgetting the fact that these other skills are highly, highly, highly important. And yes, they're important in the for-profit world as well. Soft skills are super important. In nonprofit, there's just so much more going on emotionally and trying to work with people and help people. And the way that even staff members and teams interact, it's just a little bit different. And so we need to be highly aware that those soft skills play even a bigger role because as you're trying to do good, if the focus is on just accomplishing more and more and more and more, you can very easily hurt the people who are in the trenches with you as you're trying to just push the cause and push the movement forward a little bit more. Now, as we look at all of this and all of the different moving parts through the lens of here's what we've seen over many years, this is like the perfect storm of a bad situation. This organization has senior management or senior leadership who doesn't want to rock the boat and possibly mess something up. And they're like, we will accept bad because it could be worse. We have a leader who either really likes control or is just lacking empathy or maybe doesn't have soft skills or maybe just doesn't care about the soft skills.
Or a combination of all those problems.
Probably a combination of all those problems in some capacity. Who is negatively impacting the people who are working within the organization, and someone who is coming into this organization saying, I'm willing to give charity work a try for the first time, but I don't like this and I don't find particular meaning with it, which makes all the other pieces even show up that much bigger. Mm-hmm. Really, this organization, in order for it to change, is really going to take a change in leadership. I would say for the person who posted, if you want to work in nonprofit, start by finding a cause or a sector that you particularly care about so you can find some meaning within it. It'll be much more fulfilling that way. For this leadership, though, for this organization, it's going to take a change in probably the actual people involved and actually starting to address those issues. Because if they know, which the poster said they do, so if they know that there is a leader who is causing this kind of reaction with the people that they are working with, that is a conversation that should have been had day one that they heard about it and then started to take steps to address it or start getting records so that they could actually make a change in their staff if they needed it in order to protect the culture of the organization as a whole. Because if you have leaders who are willing to tolerate mean behavior within a nonprofit organization, that ripples through everyone, including the way that staff and volunteers treat the people who they're actually looking to help. Because mean behavior and little things like this, it just trickles down in organization. As they say, crap rolls downhill. And this is one of those things that will roll downhill. And leadership has shown that they are not willing to protect the culture of this organization because they don't want to have whatever conversation should be had.
Right. So that's going to be a hard thing to do, is to actually address this situation. And the feeling like, oh, we can't get rid of this person because of X. You really need to think about what happens if we don't.
Right.
And you need to think about all the people who are waiting for you as leadership to take that step and have that hard conversation, or possibly, fire this manager who is just not doing a good job and is in fact doing a very bad job. Think about all of the other employees that are waiting for you to get rid of this person. Think about it from that angle. You'll make a lot better of a decision. But also, it's not just a change in leadership either. It's a change in systems that are going to need to happen, because all of the systems have been built to prop up this unhealthy leader in this situation. And so you can get rid of the person, but if the systems are still there, there are going to be a lot of broken systems that are reacting and working in a way that props up unhealthy leaders. And it's just going to elevate someone who is in an unhealthy place back into that same spot.
A great example of a system that is taking place right now is the fact that there's a leader who makes other people's cry, who makes other people cry, who still has a job, which means that other people who aren't even in the same level of leadership are looking at this leader saying, if I want to progress in this organization, I need to adopt that attitude and become more okay with that. And so that is a reward system that's in place that is helping to enable this leader to maintain their position. And you can remove the leader, but if everyone still sees that system as viable, that is still being promoted within the organization. And changing out systems is the harder thing to do, but it is the thing that will create the most change over time. So if you found this interesting, we have another story from a nonprofit who asked their job candidates to lowball their own salary through prayer. So that's on the screen, and we'll see you over there.